What up, fellow nerds, and welcome to part 2 of Timeline To Judgment Day, Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
And today is a judgment day indeed for many judgments to judge. Remember, if you like this video, please hit the like button. Make sure that you tell all your friends about it by sharing it with them.
And hit that bell to be notified of future videos.
And if you'd like to judge us, leave a comment.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, fellow nerds, we have got one of the most highly acclaimed Terminator movies and one of the most highly acclaimed sequels that exist so far. We're going to be talking about, of course, Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
MC it, man.
What?
Bring it.
You haven't seen it?
No.
What do you mean you haven't seen it? Dave, you were supposed to have watched it already.
Oh, no.
Okay. Anyway, so if you have not watched our previous video talking about the first movie, Terminator, actually, go back and watch that first. We do a very thorough breakdown of a lot of the things, and we're going to be kind of going back to some of those in this review as well.
Actually, the link will be in the comment sections down below.
Yeah, there you go.
We are
Perfect.
creating a playlist with all of these, and they'll all be there. So if you haven't seen any of them, please go watch them.
Yeah, definitely. So again, just like the last one, we're not going to be doing a full plot point by plot point breakdown of this movie. Instead, what we're going to be doing is kind of touching on a few things that are relevant to how they changed the timeline. We're going to be talking more about the now named T-800. As we mentioned in the previous video, he was only known as the Cyberdyne Systems Model 101, so now he's been given an official title. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about Skynet's new Terminator, the T-1000, and basically what this means for, Judgment Day.
And I think all of us agree, as it stands right now, this is the best Terminator movie that they've made. I mean,
absolutely, yes.
we talked about it before. They didn't rush the sequel out. It came out 7 years later.
7 years later.
And it's set 11 years later. This is set in 1997.
This is set in 1995.
Yeah, 1995, 11 years after 84. Released in 1991. And I really there was a lot of parallels to the first one, which I thought was good. The Skynet sends back someone to murder John Connor. The Resistance sends back their own Terminator to kind of save him. So a lot was done. They had a lot better, we've talked about
They had a much larger budget. So just to go back, I looked it up after the fact. We were talking about how the Terminator had kind of, much smaller budget. So the Terminator only had a $6.4 million budget. In contrast, the budget for Terminator 2, $100 million. And any guess on how much it made back in just the box office alone?
Guessing 500 mil?
524 million, yeah. Very good guess. Yeah, definitely worth it.
So it pulled a profit.
Oh, yeah.
That's why we got Terminator 3.
Well, we'll talk about that one later. We want to keep it positive here.
Yeah.
Yay!
Things about this movie I liked. I liked the plot points. The plot, we're not going to go over all of them, like I said, but it just seemed to flow. Everything seemed to fall into place at the right time. Yep. It didn't have
at the right time.
Didn't have all these gaping holes where you're just like, what the heck just happened there? It was a good story. I liked the story. I liked all of the acting in it. It all, of course, that one guy, I can't ever remember his name, but he's a psychiatrist from both movies. The most annoying character.
Dr. Silberman, played by Earl Bone.
And he was, actually convinced at this time that, this whole story was true. At least temporarily.
Well, and I think one of the good parts about this, too, is, they didn't just shoehorn, John believes. John thought his mom was crazy, too. He was living with a foster family who basically was, because his mom was, in a psychiatric home.
Oh, yeah.
Because who would believe that? Without proof, someone going on about this, of course they're going to be like, sure, there's,
Right.
killer robots from the future after you. That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
And growing up as a kid, I used to watch that and say, why don't they believe her? Why don't they listen? This is so obvious. And then you grow up and you look back, and if somebody came at me and told me that, I'd be like, get out of here, man.
Right. Yeah. Really? Future time-traveling robots? Coming back to... Okay, right, Mom.
Yeah.
Thanks for turning me into a proto-terrorist.
Well, and of course, someone who's egocentric and has that sort of narcissistic personality, of course the killer robots from the future are coming for you.
Right, yeah.
You lead the resistance. Yeah, you're that important.
Yes, yeah. So, one thing that that I've noticed about this movie is if you do not watch any of the previews or any of the introductory material or anything leading up to this movie, you go in, completely blind, you don't know the plot of this movie at all. I believe James Cameron's original idea was to kind of throw in a bit of a twist, because as we've mentioned, so you've got your T-800 and you've got your T-1000, but the way they introduce both characters, there's a very stark contrast between the two of them, and you're almost led to believe that the T-800 is still the bad guy, still the bad Terminator, because if you saw the first movie, then obviously he's the killer robot, and as he is introduced, he's immediately going into a bar, he's punching people, killing people, he's going on a rampage, and oh yeah, okay, he's definitely the bad guy. The first time that we see Robert Patrick as the T-1000, it looks like he might possibly knock out a police officer. We aren't really shown. We don't see a dead body, so we're not necessarily led to believe that he killed anybody. And whenever he is looking for John Connor, as an infiltrator, he's acting very polite. He's integrating very well with society. He doesn't look as big and buff as Arnold.
He looks like someone that you would trust.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he takes the form of a police officer, somebody that you would trust, whereas Arnold takes the form of a biker, I guess. So.
Well, and I thought it was one of the really great scenes in this movie is when Arnold comes walking out of the elevator when Sarah Connor is escaping.
Oh, that,
and she, flips out.
Well,
She's,
crawling
backwards.
Of course she would.
Yeah, and that's why I liked it so much. She had no idea that it's the good guy now.
Right.
Until, John comes along. I'm like, it's fine, it's fine.
Yeah. And you were talking about Robert Patrick. Every line that he was delivering, you would believe, knowing that he's a Terminator, if you're a regular person not knowing he's a Terminator, it would seem like a regular conversation. But since there's that subtle difference as the audience that he's a Terminator, the way he's delivering his lines is it's spot on. It's so perfect.
And like you said it earlier, it's how a robot thinks a human talks.
Oh, yeah.
And he blew it away. Robert Patrick was amazing in this film.
Yeah, there was no ad lib. It would be all predicted lines. Like if they say this, I'm going to say this. And it was in the way he said it.
And his facial features match too, because I love the part where he's talking to John Connor's foster parents, because again we mentioned that Sarah Connor's in a psychiatric ward. So they say, "Okay, officer, what has he done this time?" And he says,
"We just want to
I just want to talk to him." And they said, some big guy on a bike came and wanted to talk to him earlier, and he goes, "I wouldn't worry about him."
Yeah.
First off, either A, he doesn't seem to know that this is another Terminator, and he's just thinking it's another Resistance guy, which that could very well be, because he did seem surprised by much of what Arnold was doing, but he also might just be so confident in his abilities that
he's like a T-800.
Yeah.
Or he might have been
they don't need to have liquid metal.
He might have been thinking also this is just some regular idiot who lives in this time. If he didn't know the other Terminator was sent back, he's just I can handle whatever.
He might not have known, because I believe I think what they had said, I don't know if they necessarily said it in this movie, but I think the background was that Skynet was not under the assumption that the Resistance could capture and reprogram any of their Terminators, because we're going to talk about this in Terminator 3, but they don't begin sending back Terminators until T3. Robert Patrick, he wasn't intended to go after Terminators. He was just supposed to be a more advanced Terminator.
Yeah.
With his what do they call it, mimetic polyalloy, and I think that was I want to say that's because the idea of maybe nanotechnology just didn't exist at the time, so maybe they didn't know what to call it, but that's effectively what it is.
And I like the scene too when he's hooked to the car.
Yes.
And Arnold blows the thing away, and John Connor, I keep wanting to call him Edward Furlow, but he throws it back and it just kind of liquefies and goes into his foot. I'm like, that was so great.
You know what? Can we just stop and give a shout out to the visual effects team of Terminator 2 because, man,
Way
so
ahead of its
good.
time.
Way ahead of its time, and it still holds up today. Excellent work.
Thank you
Seriously.
very much.
Yeah. So we talked about this in our last review that the idea of a liquid metal Terminator was something that James Cameron wanted to do in the original movie, but he just didn't have the first off, he didn't have the budget, but he really didn't have the visual effects that could reproduce that. So the fact that he was finally able to do it, excellent.
Yeah, he was able to do. That's probably what brought him back.
Oh yeah.
Saying here's a bigger budget for you, because with $6 million, he's probably like, oh man, I can barely do this. I'm not sure what the budget was for 2. Oh, it was $100 million.
100 million.
100 million back in 1990 when they were actually doing the production.
Yep.
That's a lot of money. I mean, what is that worth today? Probably 500 million.
I don't
think
math.
with inflation. So
Yeah, probably.
he had what it took.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he really crafted a great movie, and we were going to talk a little bit about Dyson
Oh yes,
and
Miles
the guy
Dyson.
who kind of invented it. And I thought one of the scenes that I really thought sort of established the difference between the machines and the humans, when she had a chance to kill him, and probably would have saved millions and millions of lives had she did, even though we now know Skynet's inevitable, but she couldn't do it. He had a family, he was a guy, and she was like, I just can't do it, there's another way.
I don't know. I kind of disagree with that. I think the idea behind that was, I truly believe that they were setting up that Sarah had become more of a machine than the Terminator had.
But why didn't she kill him?
Because John stopped her. Remember, him and Uncle Bob came and stopped her. But speaking of which, that's what they're calling the T-800 in this one. He's given a name, I think, in almost every one of them. Wait, did he have a name in the first one? No, just the Terminator. Okay.
But
Yeah,
they
in
didn't
this one he's
forcibly
Uncle Bob.
stop her. She was actually the one who stopped herself from
Did she?
pulling the trigger.
Okay.
Yeah, they said stop, but she
She had to be
said,
the one to
okay,
do
there's
it.
another way, and that's when they decided to go.
And by the way, Miles Dyson was on Smallville.
Was
Really?
he
He was a
Martian Manhunter?
no, he was not. He was
Star Labs.
in the first season. He was researching the meteor rocks, and Lex hired him, and I forgot his name. Damn it, on the show. But
You let us down, Dave.
Smallville alum, nonetheless. I know his name, Joe Morton.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah.
Excellent. So Miles Dyson, definitely high up in Cyberdyne Systems. He ends up basically recreating the chip that was left back from the original Terminator. So we kind of touched on this in our first review. We mentioned that Kyle Reese was sent back in time basically to birth John Connor, and I mean, I guess also protect Sarah. Why not?
If he birthed him, that's a hell of a trip.
But,
I'm just gonna say.
but then, of course, the T-800 was also sent back to create Skynet
Yeah.
with its arm and its chip.
Because without it, it wouldn't have happened. Which is
Right?
amazing.
Yeah. Time travel, man. It's crazy.
It's not linear.
Either that, or it would have happened much later. Might not have happened in 1997. Which so far, where we're at right now, as of Terminator 2, Judgment Day is happening August 29th, 1997. All right, that is subject to change, as you'll see in our later movies. But yeah, so Miles Dyson, bigwig, works with Cyberdyne. He's recreating the CPU chip that was left over from the first T-800, and he's basically using it to make a brand new advanced learning computer that will eventually become Skynet.
Right. It's nice, you think this guy who invented or started Skynet and kind of did this is going to be this sort of evil, maniacal guy, but he
No,
was just like
he's a family
into
guy.
the technology. He was
Yeah.
just like, oh man, when I first looked at it, it was so incredible. The technology was so advanced.
Yeah.
We weren't even sure what we were looking at.
Yeah.
And it was great. They played him off that way. He wasn't like,
He's not a villain.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
he's really unaware of what he's doing. He's just intrigued by all this, and I thought that was so well played. They did a great job of.
And the thing is, as soon as they explain to him and they show him exactly what doing this, what going down this path is going to do, he immediately changes his tune. He's like, oh yeah, we need to put a stop to this immediately.
I can get you in the building.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's definitely not the villain here.
We do. I think one of the things is how they changed the timeline in this film. We know in the first one, nothing was really changed. Everything fell into perfect place like it should. John Connor was born like it was supposed to. You know, the chip and the arm were left behind so Skynet could be brought about. But this movie changes all that because they pretty much blow everything up. Yep. And they end up melting the chip and the arm at the end, even though, as Doug and Dave told me earlier, I totally forgot about the Terminator's arm.
Uncle Bob, he actually leaves his arm as it gets caught up in some gears in the factory during the final battle between Sarah, John, Uncle Bob, and the T-1000. He leaves his arm there, and they never once. Yeah, they just all walk away. They throw in the arm that they retrieve from Cyberdyne, but they never go back for the T-800 arm. So that's problematic.
Yeah, they probably felt good. Oh, it's a relief. You know, we stopped Judgment Day.
Yeah, like, we got everything. No, you didn't.
Now, granted, they did not have another chip, but here's my thought process on this. We've got a multi-million or billion-dollar company like Cyberdyne Systems that they mentioned is being funded by the U.S. Air Force. Yeah. I feel like they would have had a backup somewhere.
They definitely did.
Yeah.
That's why we may learn in the next movie that it didn't really stop Judgment Day.
It only delayed it.
And it's still in the future. Probably 2029. That's when everything dystopian dies, right?
Right, yeah.
We're going to be at 2029 soon. Yeah. They're going to have to change those dates.
Yeah. Or are they?
All I know is Wolverine dies that year, man.
Uh-oh.
Hugh Jackman?
No. God, I wouldn't say that.
I hope not. But, you know, one of the things, too, in the final battle, when, like, all the liquid nitrogen gets placed on him, he's, like, frozen, and they go, I'll take care of this, and they blow him up. And they're like, oh, thank God this is over. And then the pieces start, like, melting because they're near the lava or whatever, and it's start forming back together. It's like,
were you guys...
Nothing can stop this thing.
You know when they did that? When they did that, were you guys thinking, like, man, why did Arnold shoot him?
Right.
Wouldn't it have made more sense to, like, leave him frozen and maybe, I don't know, load him up on a high-low, dump him somewhere? I don't know.
Did you know, in that scene that everyone else thought it was over, Arnold, as soon as he shot him, he was still like, you got to get out of here. Because he, you know, so this Terminator still knows that he's not done yet. Like, this is temporary. But, you know, Linda Hamilton, and of course, you know, the Connor family, thought it was all over.
Those Connors.
Silly. Silly conclusions.
Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit about some of the characters. So there's definitely a change in Terminator 2 from The Terminator. So we mentioned that The Terminator was definitely more of a sci-fi thriller. It was definitely framed as sort of a horror movie. A lot of it is shot at night. It's dark. It's, you know, you've got this killer robot chasing after them. This one, they start to put a few more lighthearted moments in here and there. A few laughs, a few chuckles. And just like they did with a lot of movies in the late 80s, early 90s, they targeted an R-rated movie at kids. I saw it when I was in the first grade. So, good job. Thanks, Mom and Dad.
I was 21 and in the Marine Corps and saw it. So.
All right. But, yeah, so... you've got a lot of this is now shot in the daylight. You've got a lot more jokes, and I told you guys to pay attention to the scene in the hotel where, you know, the T-800 is popping out his eye, and he now has to put sunglasses on in order to hide and be an infiltrator again. For some reason, and I have never understood this, in the beginning of Terminator 2. When he goes into the bar and he gets his clothes and everything like that and goes on his little mini rampage, when he's walking out, he takes the sunglasses from the bar owner, pulls them out of his pocket, and puts them on. But why? I've never understood that.
In case his eye gets damaged again?
He had a reason. He had a reason to do it in the first movie. He had to blend in. He really didn't, in my opinion. He did not have a reason. It was at night, yes. It was at night. And he's getting ready to get on a motorcycle, but he doesn't need sunglasses.
Right.
Really.
In the plot, it really had no reason. It was there for just...
And then, of course, they have to play, was it Bad to the Bone?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, come on. Could you not, guys?
Yeah, it's a little kooky, but it's funny. Come on, it worked.
I love the Terminator, and so I'm nitpicky about certain things. But, one thing that I do want to point out. So, as we've been talking about this movie, we watched the extended version that had some scenes that were cut from the original theatrical release. I personally like most of those deleted scenes. I kind of wish that they had been left in, except for the very end. We'll get to that in a minute, though. But one thing that I think we were talking about this, going back to the factory towards the end when they're fighting, one of the cut scenes that I really wish I would have left in was right after the T-1000 is frozen. We see that temperature is actually this Terminator's weakness, extreme temperatures. After he's frozen, it causes a glitch in his nanites or whatever, because every time he spends too long touching a certain object, he begins to automatically take its form. You guys noticed that?
Yeah, when he walked up and he grabbed the railing.
Yes, exactly, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden his hand turned yellow and black.
Yeah.
And that was the reason why John, in the original cut of the film, before the theatrical cut, that's how John knew that this was not his mother. He looked down and he saw his feet, and it was blending in with the steel grating.
Yeah, and that was in the deleted scene that you're talking about. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, not in the theatrical cut. So I I honestly don't know. I don't recall how or what excuse they had for how John somehow knew that that wasn't his mother. I'm not sure what they went with. But yeah, I kind of wish that they would have left that in, because that was really cool, and it lets you know a little bit more about that Terminator. So you see that the extreme cold affects him, and obviously when he falls into the molten steel, that super affects him.
And he screams.
He screams in pain.
Terminators have pain too.
Hey, Terminators need love too.
They
They
do,
just
but
don't
they gotta
know
pay.
So, a fun fact about this movie, we were talking about Edward Furlong and how much I personally didn't like him in this movie, but, whatever. He's a kid.
Yeah.
Did you guys know that this movie took so long to film that he actually aged throughout?
I did not know.
I can imagine. James Cameron is famous for having long filming times. I mean, Avatar took, I think, 10 years for all the effects and everything to get
Yeah,
done.
you can see in the beginning of the movie he looks younger, then in the desert he looks a little bit older, and then at the factory he looks younger again.
I did not notice that.
Yep.
His high-pitched screams were a little bit, nerve-grating on me. But, it all seemed kind of necessary. It didn't take from the movie for me.
No, it's just one of those like little nitpicks that you notice when you've watched it 42 times
That's it, huh?
this week.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching, and remember, tune in next week for part 3 of our Timeline to Judgment Day with Terminator: Rise of the Machines.
Oh boy.